Hey guys, how's it going? Okay, so today we're going to talk about a palette that everybody is talking about. By now you have heard everything about this palette, the Anastasia Subculture Palette. I don't really want to discuss what other people have talked about regarding this palette because I feel like everybody has done it. We've heard it all. By now you know everything there is to know about how bad this palette is or what's good. There are the defenders, there are the naysayers. It's all out there for you to watch. So I'm just going to be giving my opinion on what I have seen while working with it. What I will not be doing is taking a brush and swirling it around in the palette and saying, oh my god, look at that fallout! WTF! No, I'm not going to do it. So I not only have the Subculture palette and the Modern Renaissance palette, I also have the Anastasia World Traveler palette. So I have all three palettes. All three of them have been different in formula and pigmentation, but I've really loved the World Traveler palette and the Modern Renaissance palette in how user-friendly they are. As a complete amateur and a complete newbie to putting eyeshadow on, I think you could still take this palette and you could create a beautiful look. It's so pigmented, it blends really easily. I mean, it is almost foolproof. So I think that's where the criticisms come from, is that people expected the Modern Renaissance palette just with different colors. And honestly, that's what I expected as well, because had the Subculture palette been exactly like the Modern Renaissance palette, just with the deeper colors, I would have loved it. If I take a brush and I dip it into a color on the Modern Renaissance palette, even with a little extra pressure, you still end up with a lot of color on your brush. Likewise with the Subculture palette, if I take the brush and I dip it into any color with too much force, I will end up with a lot of color on the brush. However, the reason I feel that that's being felt more with the Subculture palette is because the colors are darker. The colors in the Modern Renaissance palette are easier to work with, and also because they are so easy to blend out, it doesn't matter if you apply too much pigment, you can still easily blend it out. While with the Subculture palette, what I've found is that it is very stubborn to blend out. So if you put too much product on your lids, it could possibly ruin your whole look. I did create one eye look with the Modern Renaissance palette and one eye look with the Subculture palette, just to show you guys the differences in formula and blendability and pigmentation. So let's take a look. Starting off with the Subculture palette, the first color I went in with was Edge. I used my Lancome blending brush because unfortunately the brush that comes with this palette is terrible. Straight away, despite using only one tap, I applied too much product. I'm going to be giving my criticisms as I go, so straight up, blending is a witch with this palette. As you can see, I'm having trouble blending this color out, and unfortunately, it's not just this color. Because of the mattes being so matte, this is a running theme with this palette. Next, I went in with the color Untamed, lightly pressing and tapping off the excess. I did use the palette brush here because I wanted to show how ill-suited this brush is for this palette. I applied Untamed to my outer corner, lightly blending it inwards as I went. Another criticism of this palette, the eyeshadows are inconsistent. I'll get into that more later as well. While most of the other mattes are heavily pigmented, this one was almost irritating in how many times I had to go in with my brush to get the color to apply evenly, which, if I am to be honest, was also the fault of the brush. Next, I picked up the color Axis on my MAC 219 pencil brush, and I used this color to deepen the outer V on my lid. In with the color Electric with my Coastal Scent shadow brush, I'm applying it on the inner half of my eyelid. I'm going to talk about that inconsistency again. This is easily the prettiest color in the Subculture palette, but you really have to pack this shadow on to get it to show up the way you would want it to, which is a shame because it is so stinking pretty. With the color Adorn, with that same Coastal Scents shadow brush, I lightly tapped it into the shadow and placed the color in the middle of my lid. Then, Taking my Lancome blending brush, I attempted to lightly blend away any harsh lines. I added the Kat Von D tattoo liner and It Cosmetics Superhero Mascara for the completed look. The last minute addition, I did apply the color Cube to my brow bone and to the inner corner of my eye. The Modern Renaissance palette on my other eye, I used Buon Fresco as my transition color, gradually applying this in my crease and onto my outer lid. I did use the brush that came with the Modern Renaissance palette, which is actually a great brush. Using the other end of that same brush, I applied Love Letter into the outer V of my eye and gradually brought it into my crease. And then, using my Lancome blending brush, I lightly blended the shadows. The purpose of using the Modern Renaissance palette is not to do another tutorial, rather to show the ease of using this palette versus the Subculture palette, so I will be moving through this fairly quickly. Picking up Red Ochre on my MAC 219 pencil brush, I used that color to deepen the outer V of my eye. I then applied Primavera onto the inner portion of my lid. Then, using the blending side of the same palette brush, I gently blended the shadows out. As you can see, these shadows blend like a dream and give you a flawless, seamless look, while still being well defined. To complete the look, I applied Vermeer to my brow bone and the inner corner of my eye. Using the Modern Renaissance palette, it's very easy to blend out the shadow on the outer area of the eye to create that nice diagonal ending point. But with the Subculture palette, I found it difficult to blend out that stubborn color and think you would definitely have to use the tape method or invest in eyeshadow shields. So am I returning this? No. I do like some things about this, and I like them enough to keep this. This color Cube, it looks white, but when you put it on, it is the most beautiful highlight. You can actually see that this has a really nice holographic touch of pink to it, making it one of my favorites in the palette. Love this color Adorn. It's a really beautiful gold. You can see a little goes a long way. This color really pops, and you only need a dab to get a really beautiful foiled look. I think it's really pretty. I also really love Electric, despite the fact that it goes on patchy. Electric really does take some building up to get it to show up properly, but it's still such a pretty color. It's easily the prettiest color in this palette. You really can create some really pretty looks with this palette. You're just gonna have to work hard to get them. If you are going to buy this palette, buy it from some place like Sephora or Ulta that has a really good return policy. Try it out in stores first. If you end up buying it, you can always return it later on. Personally, I like it. I'm not going to knock it. I think that it definitely has its share of flaws. I just wish that Anastasia had stuck with the original formula that they had used with the Modern Renaissance palette. I do see what they were trying to do with it by making the palette more matte, but I think that backfired because it just did not have the same effect. And it's not as user-friendly, which makes it less sellable in a way. Okay guys, that was my review on the Subculture palette. Hopefully it wasn't too long. I was trying to keep it short and sweet and not add in any of the drama that we've been seeing on social media. See you next time. Bye.